Amid the icy waters, a polar bear appears near a ship. Its movements seem like a plea for help. When the crew understands what's happening, a dramatic rescue begins, and what they discover changes everything. In the bone-chilling waters of the Svalbard archipelago, where the sun played hide-and-seek with the endless horizon, the Northern Star fishing vessel fought against the merciless Arctic waves. Captain Henry Blake stood at the helm, his weathered hands gripping the wheel with the familiarity of someone who had spent more time at sea than on land. His eyes, deep-set and haunted by memories of past decisions, scanned the turbulent waters ahead. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us from which city you're watching us. We're keeping it going. The vessel's crew worked in synchronized precision, preparing the fishing nets for what promised to be their last catch before an approaching storm forced them back to shore. The Arctic cod season was drawing to a close, and the pressure to secure a profitable haul weighed heavily on everyone's shoulders. Sarah Whitaker adjusted her thermal gear as she monitored the sonar equipment. Once a distinguished marine biologist, she now found herself aboard a fishing vessel, running from a past that still cast long shadows over her present. Her fingers traced the screen's patterns with the expertise of someone who understood the ocean's secrets far beyond mere fishing coordinates. "Temperatures dropping faster than expected," Mike Harris announced, his young face flushed with excitement despite the biting cold. The rookie fisherman's enthusiasm was a stark contrast to the grim determination that characterized most of the crew. Tommy Price, a seasoned veteran whose loyalty to Captain Blake bordered on devotion, simply nodded in acknowledgement. In the depths of the ship, Chief Engineer Evan Carter monitored the engines with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to the task at hand. His taciturn demeanor masked calculations that had nothing to do with the ship's mechanical well-being. The wind howled louder, carrying with it the promise of the approaching storm. Captain Blake knew they were pushing their luck, but the thought of returning to port without a full hold made his jaw clench. They needed this catch. He needed this catch. "Captain!" Sarah's voice cut through the mechanical hum of the bridge. "There's something on the starboard side." Through the swirling snow, a solitary figure emerged on a precarious ice floe. A polar bear, its usually majestic form now weakened and struggling, fought to maintain its balance on the increasingly unstable platform. The sight stopped everyone in their tracks. Sarah felt her heart constrict. The bear's eyes, dark and intelligent, seemed to lock with hers across the distance. In that moment, all her scientific training melted away, replaced by a profound connection she couldn't explain. "We have to help," she declared, her voice carrying the weight of conviction. Captain Blake's expression hardened. "The storm's almost upon us. We can't risk the ship or the crew." "Henry," Sarah stepped closer, lowering her voice, "look at it. Really look. We might be its only chance." The captain's fingers drummed against the wheel as he weighed his options. The crew watched in tense silence, the fishing nets momentarily forgotten. Even Evan emerged from his domain below deck, his usual scowl deepening as he assessed the situation. Tommy Price moved to stand beside the captain. "Whatever you decide, sir, we're with you." The wind picked up, causing the ship to groan against the mounting waves. The bear struggled to maintain its footing, its movements becoming increasingly desperate. Mike Harris, unable to contain himself, blurted out, "We can't just leave it." Captain Blake's eyes met Sarah's, and in that moment something shifted. Perhaps it was the echo of past regrets, or maybe the recognition of a chance at redemption. Whatever the reason, he gave a sharp nod. "Prepare the rescue boat," he ordered, his voice cutting through the howling wind. "But we move fast. That storm won't wait for acts of kindness." As the crew sprang into action, Sarah caught a glimpse of Evan's face. The engineer's expression had darkened, his hands clenching into fists before he disappeared back below deck. She filed away this observation, but the bear's desperate situation demanded her immediate attention. The rescue boat was readied, its small frame dwarfed by the increasingly angry seas. Sarah, Mike, and Tommy volunteered for the rescue attempt, while Captain Blake coordinated from the bridge. As they prepared to lower the boat, the sky darkened ominously, and the wind carried with it the first stinging particles of ice. Time was running out, and the real challenge was just beginning. The bear watched their approach, its eyes holding a wisdom that seemed almost human. unaware that its presence would set in motion a chain of events that would test the limits of human compassion and reveal the true nature of everyone aboard the Northern Star. The rescue boat descended into the churning waters with Sarah, Mike, and Tommy aboard, their breath forming crystalline clouds in the frigid air. The distance between the Northern Star and the stranded polar bear seemed to stretch endlessly as they fought against the strengthening current. Sarah's hands, steady from years of fieldwork, gripped the safety line while Tommy maneuvered their small craft through the treacherous waters. Mike Harris, the youngest of the trio, couldn't tear his eyes away from the bear. "It's like it knows we're coming," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind's howl. The bear's gaze remained fixed on their approaching boat, its movements becoming more tentative as the ice beneath its paws shifted treacherously. From the bridge of the Northern Star, Captain Henry Blake watched through binoculars, his knuckles white against the cold metal. Every instinct honed from decades at sea screamed that they were cutting it too close. The storm system approaching from the north was gathering strength faster than predicted, its dark mass looming like a predator ready to strike. Below deck, Evan Carter moved through the engine room with calculated precision. His fingers traced the control panels, lingering over critical systems as his mind raced with possibilities. The sound of the engines masked the soft click of compartments being accessed, of settings being ever so slightly adjusted. His face remained impassive, but his eyes held the cold calculation of someone whose plans were already in motion. The rescue boat had nearly reached the ice floe when disaster struck. A sudden shift in the current sent their small craft lurching violently to one side. Mike, who had been leaning forward to secure a rescue line, lost his balance. The world seemed to slow down as he pitched forward, his arms windmilling helplessly before he plunged into the Arctic waters. "Mike!" Sarah's scream cut through the air as Tommy fought to stabilize the boat. The young fisherman's head broke the surface, his gasps for air turning into desperate cries as the cold seized his muscles. The polar bear, until now maintaining its distance, suddenly moved with unexpected purpose. The massive creature edged closer to where Mike thrashed in the water, its movements deliberate and measured. Sarah and Tommy watched in astonishment as the bear positioned itself at the edge of the ice, its powerful form lowering closer to the water's surface. What happened next defied everything Sarah thought she knew about wildlife behavior. The bear extended itself toward Mike, creating a stable platform with its body. Its actions seemed almost calculated, as if it understood exactly what needed to be done. Mike, fighting against the paralyzing cold, managed to grasp onto the bear's fur. With a strength born of desperation, he pulled himself up onto the ice, collapsing in a shivering heap mere feet from the creature that had just saved his life. "It's impossible," Sarah breathed, her scientific mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. The bear maintained its position, watching Mike with what could only be described as concern, its behavior so far removed from typical predatory instincts that it bordered on the supernatural. Tommy maneuvered the boat closer to the ice edge, his experienced hands steady despite the shock of what they had just witnessed. "We need to get him back to the ship now," he urged, his voice tight with worry. The wind had picked up significantly, and the first heavy snowflakes were beginning to fall. As they worked to help Mike into the boat, Captain Blake's voice crackled over their radio. "Storm's accelerating. You need to return immediately." The urgency in his tone left no room for argument. Sarah looked at the bear, their eyes meeting once again in that inexplicable connection. The creature seemed to understand, taking a step back as they prepared to retreat. But as they turned the boat toward the Northern Star, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. The ship's movements seemed slightly off, its responses to the waves not quite right. Years of observing marine vessels had given her an eye for such details, and something was definitely wrong with their only way back to safety. Through the increasingly heavy snowfall, she caught a glimpse of Evan watching from the deck, his figure a dark silhouette against the ship's lights. The expression on his face, barely visible through the storm, confirmed her growing suspicions. Something was terribly wrong aboard the Northern Star, and they were heading straight back into whatever trap awaited them. The return journey to the Northern Star proved more challenging than the initial rescue attempt. Mike shivered violently in the boat, his wet clothes already starting to freeze in the brutal Arctic air. Tommy steered their small craft through increasingly violent waves, while Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the ship ahead, her mind racing with possibilities about what might be wrong with their vessel. The storm descended upon them with unprecedented fury, transforming the grey twilight into a chaotic blur of white. Captain Blake's voice crackled through the radio again, distorted by static and wind. "The navigation systems are malfunctioning. Something's interfering with our ability to maintain position." Sarah's suspicions deepened as she watched the Northern Star's erratic movements. Her years of marine research had taught her to read ships like books, and right now, every page spelled danger. The vessel's struggling engines produced an irregular rhythm that echoed across the water, a mechanical cry for help that only those who knew ships intimately would recognize. As they finally reached the ship's side, the crew worked together to hoist the rescue boat. Mike was immediately rushed inside to prevent hypothermia, while Sarah made her way to the bridge. The polar bear they'd been forced to abandon was now barely visible through the storm, a lonely figure growing smaller as the distance between them increased. "The navigation system isn't just malfunctioning," Sarah announced as she entered the bridge, her voice tight with certainty. "Someone's tampered with it." She moved to the console, her fingers flying over the controls with practiced efficiency. "These readings don't make sense. The system's been deliberately miscalibrated." Captain Blake's expression darkened as he processed this information. "Where's Carter?" he demanded, suddenly aware of the engineer's conspicuous absence from his usual post. Tommy, who had just arrived on the bridge, shook his head. "He was in the engine room when I checked, but something seemed off. He was working on something, but he shut the panel as soon as he saw me." The ship lurched violently, sending equipment sliding across surfaces. Below decks, the sound of metal groaning under stress echoed through the corridors. Captain Blake grabbed the radio, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Carter, report to the bridge immediately." Static answered his call. Sarah moved toward the door. "I'm going to check the engine room. Those sounds aren't normal, and if someone's sabotaging our systems..." She left the sentence unfinished, but the implications hung heavy in the air. "I'll go with you," Tommy volunteered, his loyalty to the ship and its captain evident in every movement. They made their way through the pitching vessel, holding onto railings as the storm tossed the ship like a toy. The closer they got to the engine room, the more obvious it became that something was terribly wrong. The usual steady hum of machinery had transformed into an irregular rhythm that sent chills down Sarah's spine. When they reached the engine room, they found Evan Carter hunched over a control panel, his movements precise and deliberate. He barely acknowledged their presence, continuing his work with single-minded focus. "Step away from the controls," Tommy ordered, his voice carrying an authority that Sarah had never heard before. Evan straightened slowly, turning to face them with an expression that made Sarah's blood run cold. "You don't understand," he said, his voice eerily calm despite the chaos around them. "This ship's worth more to certain parties as a loss than it ever was as a fishing vessel. The insurance payout alone." His words were cut short by a sudden explosion of sparks from the panel he'd been working on. Smoke began to curl from beneath the control station, and warning alarms blared through the ship's corridors. The acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air as the engine room's emergency lights flashed to life. "What have you done?" Sarah demanded, rushing to assess the damage. But Evan's sabotage had been thorough. The navigation systems were completely compromised, and in these treacherous waters, with a storm raging around them, that could mean disaster for everyone aboard. The ship's radio crackled to life with Captain Blake's urgent voice. "Fire in the engine room. All hands report to emergency stations." The message echoed through the corridors as the Northern Star, now at the mercy of both the storm and internal betrayal, fought against forces that threatened to tear it apart from both within and without. The engine room erupted into controlled chaos as emergency protocols kicked in. Sarah and Tommy worked frantically to contain the spreading fire, while Evan attempted to slip away in the confusion. The smoke grew thicker, forcing them to pull their thermal shirts over their mouths as makeshift filters. "Don't let him get away," Sarah shouted to Tommy, her hands flying over the emergency controls. She knew the ship's systems well enough from her years of research vessel experience to understand that every second counted. The fire suppression system had been compromised, another of Evan's carefully planned sabotages. Captain Blake's voice boomed through the ship's speakers. "All hands, this is the captain. Engine room fire reported." Implement Emergency Protocol Delta immediately. The sound of boots thundering through corridors echoed as crew members rushed to their assigned positions. Mike, still recovering from his icy plunge, joined the effort, proving his worth despite his inexperience. He helped coordinate the fire suppression efforts, while other crew members formed a bucket brigade, an ancient but effective method when modern systems failed. Meanwhile, Tommy had caught up with Evan near the aft storage compartment. The two men faced each other in the narrow corridor, the ship's violent rolling making them both struggle for balance. "Why?" Tommy demanded, his voice thick with betrayal. "We trusted you." Evan's face twisted into a bitter smile. "It's just business," he replied coldly. "The fishing industry is dying. This ship's worth more as a loss than it'll ever be worth operational. Insurance companies pay well for accidents in these waters." The ship lurched violently, throwing both men against the bulkhead. Tommy used the momentum to his advantage, pinning Evan against the wall. "People's lives are at stake," he growled, his usually calm demeanor shattered by anger. Back in the engine room, Sarah had managed to isolate the burning section, but the damage was already extensive. The navigation systems were completely offline and the backup systems were showing signs of tampering. Through the portholes, she could see the storm intensifying, transforming the world outside into a swirling mass of white. "Captain," she called through her radio, "we've contained the fire, but the navigation systems are completely compromised. We're flying blind out here." Her voice remained steady, though her hands shook from both adrenaline and anger. "Understood," Blake replied, his tone grim. "Get up here as soon as you can. We need to figure out our position." The static in his transmission revealed just how badly their communications had been affected. As Sarah made her way to the bridge, a strange blip appeared on the few functioning monitoring systems. Through the storm's fury, something was registering on their radar. Intermittent signals that seemed to be drawing them back toward the location where they'd left the polar bear. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The bear, somehow impossibly, was connected to all of this. The way it had saved Mike, its almost human understanding, and now these strange signals leading back to its location. It couldn't be coincidence. On the bridge, Captain Blake stood at the helm, fighting to keep the ship steady in the growing storm. The windows were covered in frost and ice, reducing visibility to near zero. The few instruments still functioning painted a dire picture. They were being pushed dangerously close to a massive ice field. "Captain," Sarah began, her scientific mind struggling with what she was about to suggest, "I think we need to go back. Those signals, they're coming from where we left the bear. And after what we saw, how it helped Mike, I don't think we can ignore this." Blake turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Sarah, we're barely keeping this ship together. Going back would be our only chance," she interrupted, her voice firm. "Look at these readings. The storm's pushing us into a trap, but these signals, they might be showing us the only safe way through." The captain studied the readings, his years of experience warring with the impossibility of what they were suggesting. Outside, the wind howled louder, and the ship's hull creaked under the increasing pressure of the elements. They had precious little time to make a decision that would determine not just their fate, but that of every soul aboard the Northern Star. Captain Blake's weathered hands gripped the ship's wheel as he processed Sarah's words. The mysterious signals pulsing on their radar seemed to defy all logical explanation, yet they offered a tantalizing promise of safety through the treacherous ice field ahead. "Even if we wanted to go back," he began, his voice heavy with the weight of command, "the engine damage from the fire has severely limited our maneuverability." He gestured to the few functioning gauges, their readings painting a grim picture of their situation. Sarah leaned over the radar display, her scientific mind racing to make sense of the patterns she was seeing. "These they're not random. Look at the frequency pattern. It's almost like they're creating a path through the storm." Her fingers traced the pulsing dots on the screen, connecting invisible lines between them. Below decks, Tommy and two other crew members had secured Evan in the ship's storage room using spare fishing rope to ensure he couldn't cause any more damage. The disgraced engineer sat in sullen silence, his plans in ruins but the damage already done. Mike burst onto the bridge, his face flushed with urgency. "Captain, the ice field ahead. It's closing in on us. The forward lookout says we've got maybe 20 minutes before we're completely boxed in." The Northern Star groaned under the assault of wind and waves, its damaged systems struggling to maintain basic functions. Through the frost-covered windows, massive ice formations loomed like ghostly sentinels in the swirling snow, their edges sharp enough to tear through the ship's hull. "Those signals," Sarah insisted, her voice rising with conviction. "They're showing gaps in the ice field. See how they pulse stronger where the ice is thinner?" She pointed to specific points on the radar, where the mysterious blips seemed to intensify. "It's like we're being guided." Captain Blake studied the patterns with growing amazement. In 30 years at sea, he'd never seen anything like it. The signals did indeed seem to be creating a navigable path through the ice field, a path that led back to where they'd left the stranded polar bear. "Sarah," he said slowly, "in all your years as a marine biologist, have you ever encountered anything that could explain this? Any scientific reason why a polar bear would exhibit such intelligent behavior?" She shook her head, her eyes never leaving the radar screen. "No, but after what we saw, how it saved Mike, how it seemed to understand our intentions, there's something different about this bear, something special." The ship lurched violently as a massive wave struck the port side. Warning alarms blared as new damage reports flooded in from various sections of the vessel. The storm was intensifying, pushing them closer to the threatening ice field with each passing minute. "Captain," Tommy's voice crackled over the radio, "engine room update. We've managed to restore partial power to the port engine, but the starboard's completely gone. Whatever Evan did to the systems, it was thorough." Blake's jaw tightened as he made his decision. Years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, every instinct was telling him that their only hope lay in following those mysterious signals back to the bear. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's comm system. "We're changing course. Sarah, plot us a route following those signals. Tommy, get every bit of power you can from that port engine. Mike, I want you on bow watch. We'll need eyes up front to spot any ice we can't avoid." The crew sprang into action, their training overriding any doubts about the strangeness of their situation. The Northern Star began its slow turn, fighting against the storm's fury as it oriented itself toward the mysterious signals. Through the driving snow, Sarah caught glimpses of the massive ice formations they were attempting to navigate between. The signals on the radar pulsed stronger now, creating an almost visible pathway through the frozen maze. With each passing moment, the connection between their strange savior, the polar bear, and these inexplicable signals grew harder to dismiss as mere coincidence. "Whatever's guiding us," Sarah murmured, her eyes fixed on the radar screen, "it wants us to come back. The question is, why?" The Northern Star carved its way through the treacherous waters, following the mysterious signals that pulsed with increasing intensity on their radar. The damaged vessel groaned under the strain, its compromised systems pushing their limits as they navigated the treacherous path between massive ice formations. 10 degrees port," Sarah called out, her eyes fixed on the radar display. The signals had formed a clear pattern now, creating what appeared to be a safe corridor through the ice field. "The readings are getting stronger. We must be getting closer to the bear's location." Captain Blake adjusted their course accordingly, his experienced hands compensating for the ship's sluggish response. The loss of the starboard engine made every maneuver a challenge, requiring constant adjustments to maintain their heading through the storm. Mike maintained his position at the bow, his voice crackling through the radio as he called out ice formations looming through the swirling snow. Despite his earlier ordeal in the freezing water, he remained focused on his task, perhaps driven by a sense of connection to the creature that had saved his life. In the makeshift brig below decks, Evan sat in contemplative silence, listening to the ship's struggles. Tommy stood guard, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a stern vigilance. "You know," Evan spoke suddenly, his voice carrying an edge of desperate rationality, "there's still time to turn back. What you're doing, following some mysterious signals back to a polar bear, it's madness." Tommy's response was cut short by a violent shudder that ran through the entire vessel. Above them, Sarah's voice echoed through the ship's comm system. "Large ice formation dead ahead. Everyone brace for evasive maneuvers." The Northern Star heeled hard to port, its hull scraping against the ice with a sound that set everyone's teeth on edge. Captain Blake fought with the wheel, trying to compensate for their compromised steering. The radar signals flickered erratically, then stabilized, showing them a narrow path through the approaching ice field. "This is impossible," Sarah muttered, watching the readings. "The signal, they're adjusting in real time, showing us exactly where to go. It's as if something is actively guiding us through this maze." Through the frost-covered windows, the storm continued its relentless assault, but there was something different about the weather pattern now. The wind seemed to be swirling around them in an almost protective manner, creating a pocket of relative calm in the midst of the chaos. "Captain," Mike's excited voice came through the radio, "I can see something ahead. There's a break in the storm, and... wait." His voice trailed off in astonishment. The crew rushed to the windows, straining to see through the swirling snow. As if orchestrated by some unseen force, the storm patterns shifted, creating a momentary window of visibility. There, on a drastically reduced ice floe, stood the polar bear they had left behind. But it wasn't alone. Strange lights danced around the creature, ethereal aurora-like patterns that seemed to pulse in sync with the signals on their radar. The bear stood tall despite its obvious exhaustion, its gaze fixed on the approaching ship with an intelligence that defied explanation. "Sarah," Captain Blake called, his voice tight with controlled amazement, "in all your years of research, have you ever seen anything like this?" Before she could answer, their few remaining electronic systems began to behave erratically. Screens flickered with strange patterns, and the radar display pulsed with an intensity that nearly blinded them. Through the speakers came a series of sounds, not quite language, but carrying a complexity that suggested something far beyond random noise. "It's trying to communicate," Sarah whispered, her scientific skepticism warring with the evidence before her eyes. "All this time, the signals, the bear's behavior, it's all been an attempt to communicate something to us." The Northern Star had nearly reached the ice floe when another violent shudder ran through the ship. This time it wasn't from impact with ice. The damaged engine, pushed beyond its limits, was beginning to fail. Warning alarms blared throughout the vessel as systems started shutting down one by one. "We're losing power," Tommy's voice crackled through the radio from the engine room. "Whatever Evan did to the engines, it's causing a cascade failure. We need to act fast." The bear watched from its precarious position as the ship struggled to maintain its approach. The mysterious lights around it intensified, creating patterns that seemed to reach out toward the vessel like luminous tendrils. They were so close now, mere meters from potentially understanding the mystery that had drawn them back through impossible odds. But time was running out. The ship's systems were failing, the ice was closing in, and they had only moments to make a decision that would determine not just their fate, but perhaps something far more significant than any of them could imagine. The Northern Star drifted to a precarious stop near the ice floe, its failing engines sputtering in protest. The polar bear stood mere yards away, the mysterious lights around it casting an otherworldly glow across the frozen landscape. Sarah pressed her hand against the frost-covered window, transfixed by the scene before her. "The ice won't hold much longer," Mike reported from his position at the bow, his voice tight with concern. "It's breaking up faster than before." The bear's platform had shrunk considerably since they'd last seen it, the edges crumbling under the relentless assault of waves and wind. Captain Blake assessed their situation with the calculated precision of a seasoned mariner. The ship's systems were failing one by one, the damage from Evan's sabotage spreading through crucial components like a virus. They had minutes, perhaps less, before they lost power completely. "We need to get it aboard," Sarah declared, her voice carrying the weight of certainty. "Whatever this bear is, whatever it's trying to tell us, we can't leave it here to perish." The mysterious lights surrounding the creature pulsed in sync with her words, as if responding to her determination. "With all due respect," Tommy's voice crackled through the radio from the engine room, "how exactly do we get a full-grown polar bear onto a failing ship in the middle of a storm?" As if in answer to his question, the bear moved with deliberate purpose toward the edge of the ice nearest to the ship. The ethereal lights followed its movement, creating what appeared to be a bridge of luminescence between the ice and the vessel's deck. "Look!" Mike exclaimed, pointing through the swirling snow. "It's like it's showing us exactly where it wants to go." Sarah rushed to the bridge's emergency equipment locker, pulling out their last functioning rescue harness. "I'm going out there," she announced, already securing the straps around her body. We need to establish a physical connection between the ship and that ice flow. Captain Blake grabbed her arm, his expression grave. Sarah, this is beyond dangerous. We don't even understand what we're dealing with here. That's exactly why we have to try, she countered, her eyes meeting his with unwavering resolve. This bear saved Mike. It led us back here through impossible odds. Whatever's happening here is bigger than any of us, and we have to see it through. A violent shudder ran through the ship, accompanied by the ominous sound of metal grinding against metal from deep within the hull. Tommy's voice came through again, more urgent than before. We've lost the port engine completely. We're running on emergency power only. The storm around them had taken on an almost conscious quality, the wind and snow swirling in patterns that defied natural weather behavior. The lights around the bear intensified, creating a protective bubble that seemed to hold the worst of the storm at bay. Sarah moved toward the deck access, but Captain Blake's voice stopped her. Not alone, he declared, already reaching for a second harness. Whatever we're facing out there, we face it together. The gesture carried the weight of years of command decisions, of lives saved and lost on these treacherous waters. As they prepared to venture onto the deck, Mike noticed something on his monitoring equipment. Captain, environmental sensors are picking up something massive moving beneath the ice. Whatever it is, it's affecting the water temperature and currents around us. The bear remained eerily still, its gaze fixed on the ship, as if waiting for them to understand something of vital importance. The lights around it had formed intricate patterns now, pulsing with a complexity that suggested language rather than random phenomenon. Sarah, Captain Blake said, as they secured their safety lines, if this goes wrong... She cut him off with a shake of her head. It won't. Whatever this bear is, whatever brought us back here, it's trying to show us something. And I think we're about to find out exactly what that is. They stepped out onto the deck, the bitter cold hitting them like a physical force despite their thermal gear. The bear watched their approach, its eyes holding an intelligence that seemed to peer straight into their souls. Above them, the aurora-like lights danced and swirled, creating patterns that seemed to reach down toward the ship like beckoning fingers. The ice beneath the bear cracked ominously, a sound that carried clearly despite the howling wind. They had moments, perhaps seconds, before the entire flow disintegrated. Whatever they were going to do, it had to be now. Sarah and Captain Blake fought against the bitter wind as they made their way across the deck, their safety lines trailing behind them like lifelines to sanity in an increasingly surreal situation. The polar bear remained motionless, the mysterious lights around it creating patterns that seemed to reach out toward them, bridging the gap between ship and ice. "The ropes!" Sarah shouted over the howling wind, pointing to the rescue equipment they'd brought. "We need to establish a guideline to the ice." Her scientific mind was racing, trying to reconcile what she was seeing with what she knew about the natural world. The lights pulsed in harmony with her movements, as if responding to her intentions. From his position at the bow, Mike tracked their progress while monitoring the increasingly unstable ice formation. "The cracks are spreading faster," he called through the radio. "Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now." Below decks, Tommy worked frantically to maintain what little power they had left, while keeping a watchful eye on their unwanted guest. Evan had fallen silent, his expression unreadable as he watched the emergency lights flicker and dim. As Sarah and the captain reached the ship's rail, the bear made its move. With deliberate grace that belied its massive size, it approached the edge of the ice nearest to them. The ethereal lights followed its movement, creating what appeared to be a solid path of luminescence between the ice and the ship. "It's impossible," Captain Blake muttered, his years of experience at sea providing no context for what they were witnessing. The lights seemed to solidify, forming a bridge of pure energy that spanned the gap between ship and ice. Sarah's grip tightened on the rescue rope as she made a decision that defied conventional wisdom. "Captain, I don't think we need these," she said, her voice steady despite the surreal situation. "Look at how the lights are behaving. They're not just showing us the way, they're providing it." As if to confirm her theory, the bear placed one massive paw on the light bridge. The energy beneath its weight appeared to solidify, supporting the creature's bulk without difficulty. The bear turned its gaze to them, its eyes reflecting an intelligence that seemed to transcend natural boundaries. "This is beyond anything in our understanding," Sarah continued, her scientific training warring with the evidence before her eyes. "But right now it's our only chance." The ship groaned beneath them as another system failed, the deck tilting slightly as they lost more power to the stabilizers. Tommy's voice crackled through their radios. "We've got maybe 5 minutes of emergency power left. After that, we're completely at the mercy of the storm." Captain Blake made a decision that went against every safety protocol he'd ever learned. "Together," he said to Sarah, reaching for her hand. "Whatever happens, we face it together." They approached the rail where the light bridge met the ship. The bear watched their approach, its posture radiating an almost human patience. The lights around it pulsed with increasing intensity, creating patterns that seemed to weave themselves into the very fabric of reality. As Sarah reached out toward the bridge of light, something extraordinary happened. The energy responded to her touch, forming a solid surface beneath her hand. It was warm despite the freezing temperature, vibrating with a frequency that seemed to resonate with something deep within her consciousness. "It's safe," she breathed, wonder replacing fear in her voice. "It's actually safe." The bear took another step forward on the bridge, encouraging them to follow its lead. The ice behind it cracked and shifted, pieces breaking away into the churning sea below. Time was running out for all of them. Suddenly, Mike's urgent voice broke through their radios. "Multiple contacts beneath the surface. Something huge is moving down there, creating some kind of current pattern I've never seen before." The lights above them swirled with renewed intensity, forming shapes and patterns that felt tantalizingly close to comprehensible language. The bear turned its gaze toward the depths below, then back to Sarah and the captain, its expression somehow conveying that what they were seeing was only the beginning of something far more extraordinary. Captain Blake tightened his grip on Sarah's hand as they took their first step onto the bridge of light. The energy beneath their feet as solid as steel, yet warm and alive with possibility. They were about to cross a threshold that would forever change their understanding of the world if they survived long enough to comprehend what they were experiencing. Sarah and Captain Blake moved cautiously across the bridge of light, each step defying everything they knew about physics and reality. The energy beneath their feet hummed with an otherworldly resonance, responding to their movements like a living thing. The polar bear watched their progress with patient intelligence, the mysterious aurora around it pulsing in sync with their heartbeats. "The ship's listing to port," Tommy's urgent voice crackled through their radios. "We've lost most of the emergency power systems. Hull integrity is compromising." The Northern Star groaned beneath them, its damaged structure protesting against the relentless assault of wind and waves. Mike maintained his vigilant watch from the bow, tracking the movement of whatever lay beneath the surface. "The underwater disturbances are getting stronger," he reported, his voice tight with tension. It's like the currents themselves are trying to hold the ship in place." They were halfway across the light bridge when Sarah felt something change in the energy beneath their feet. The vibrations shifted frequency, and the aurora-like patterns above them began to coalesce into more defined shapes. The bear's eyes met hers, and in that moment, she felt a connection that transcended species, a sharing of knowledge that bypassed ordinary communication. "Captain," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder, "I think I understand now. The bear isn't just a bear. It's a messenger, a bridge between our world and something we never knew existed." The ice beneath the bear cracked again, large chunks breaking away into the churning sea. But the creature remained calm, its presence anchoring the bridge of light that now represented their only path to safety. The mysterious lights around it had formed patterns that seemed almost like writing, symbols that danced at the edge of comprehension. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently behind them. "We're taking on water." Tommy's voice was urgent through the static. "The engine room's flooding and the pumps aren't responding." The damage from Evans' sabotage was reaching its critical point, threatening to pull the Northern Star into the depths. Sarah and the captain quickened their pace, but maintained their careful movements across the energy bridge. They were nearly at the ice now, close enough to see the intricate patterns in the bear's fur, patterns that seemed to shimmer and shift in impossible ways. "Look at its eyes," Captain Blake breathed, his years of experience at sea providing no context for what he was witnessing. The bear's gaze held depths that seemed to contain entire universes, windows into a reality they were only beginning to glimpse. The wind around them had formed a protective cocoon, the storm's fury held at bay by forces they couldn't comprehend. But their sanctuary was temporary. The ice continued to break apart, and the ship behind them was losing its battle against the elements. Just as they reached the relative safety of the ice floe, Mike's voice cut through their radios with renewed urgency. "Captain! The underwater contacts! They're surfacing, all around us!" The sea around them began to churn with purpose, the water itself seeming to come alive with swirling patterns of bioluminescence. The bear turned its massive head toward the display, and the lights around it intensified, creating a dialogue of energy and light with whatever was emerging from the depths. Sarah felt the ice shelf vibrate beneath her feet, but not from instability. Something massive was moving beneath them, something that made the bear's presence seem like merely the surface of a much deeper mystery. The lights above them had formed into distinct patterns now, creating what looked like a doorway of pure energy. The bear moved toward this portal of light, then turned back to them with an expectant gaze. Its message was clear. They needed to follow, to take one more step into the unknown. But the ice was breaking apart faster now, and the ship behind them was moments away from disaster. "Sarah," Captain Blake's voice was steady despite the chaos around them. "Whatever happens next, whatever we're about to discover, remember, you were right to bring us back here." He squeezed her hand, a gesture of trust and support in the face of the impossible. The Northern Star's distress signals pierced through the Arctic night, their desperate pulses echoing across the frozen wasteland. Below deck, Tommy fought against rising water levels, his hands moving with practiced efficiency as he attempted to seal off the flooding compartments. The damage from Evan's sabotage had reached a critical point, threatening to tear the ship apart from within. "Engine rooms completely flooded," Tommy's voice crackled through the radio. "We're losing her, Captain." The ship groaned beneath them, its metal skeleton protesting against the relentless assault of nature and betrayal. On the rapidly disintegrating ice floe, Sarah and Captain Blake stood transfixed by the scene unfolding before them. The polar bear had positioned itself before the portal of light, its massive form silhouetted against the swirling energy. The mysterious patterns above them had transformed into what appeared to be a complex network of interconnected symbols, each pulsing with its own rhythm. "Mike!" Captain Blake called into his radio. "Status report!" "The underwater contacts are still surfacing, sir." Mike's voice was filled with wonder and disbelief. They're creating some kind of pattern in the water. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." The sea around them had indeed come alive with bioluminescent displays that mirrored the aurora-like lights above. The water seemed to move with conscious purpose, creating currents that worked to hold the failing ship in place despite the storm's fury. Sarah's scientific mind raced to process what she was witnessing. The bear turned its gaze to her, and in that moment she felt another wave of understanding wash over her. "Captain," she said, her voice steady despite the surreal situation, "I think I know what it wants. It's not just showing us an escape. It's showing us something that's been here all along, something we've been too blind to see." The ice beneath their feet cracked again, sending vibrations through the shrinking floe. The bear remained unnaturally calm, its presence anchoring the gateway of light that now represented their only chance for survival. Suddenly a new sound cut through the chaos, the distant whump-whump-whump of helicopter blades. Through the swirling snow, a search and rescue helicopter appeared, its searchlight cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope. "This is Arctic Rescue 1, a voice crackled through their emergency channel. "We've picked up your distress signal, but we're running low on fuel and can only take 2 passengers." The timing couldn't have been more critical. The Northern Star was losing its battle against the elements, the ice floe was minutes from complete disintegration, and now they faced an impossible choice. Sarah looked at the bear, then back at the ship where their crew still fought for survival. The mysterious light seemed to pulse more urgently now, as if sensing the weight of the moment. The bear's eyes held her gaze, conveying a message that transcended ordinary communication. "Captain," she began, but Blake cut her off with a raised hand. "Sarah, you need to go with the bear," he said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Whatever this is, whatever we've stumbled upon here, it's bigger than all of us, and you're the only one who can understand it." Before she could protest, Tommy's voice broke through their radios again. "Captain, we've got another problem. Evans escaped." The news sent a new wave of urgency through their already critical situation. The helicopter hovering above them couldn't wait much longer. The ship was failing, and the ice beneath their feet was rapidly disappearing. Every second that passed brought them closer to disaster. The bear moved closer to Sarah, its massive form radiating an almost tangible aura of protective energy. The lights around them pulsed with increased intensity, creating patterns that seemed to reach out toward the helicopter, like guiding beacons. Captain Blake made a decision that would change all their lives forever. "Arctic Rescue 1, he called into his radio. "Prepare for pickup. We're sending up our marine biologist and—" He paused, looking at the bear with a mixture of wonder and determination. A very special passenger. The rescue helicopter hovered precariously above the diminishing ice floe, its rotors fighting against the fierce Arctic winds. Sarah stood beside the polar bear, her mind racing with the implications of what they were about to attempt. The mysterious lights continued their dance around them, creating a protective barrier against the worst of the storm. "We need to get you both up there now," Captain Blake shouted over the wind, helping to secure the rescue harness around Sarah. The bear watched the proceedings with an almost human patience, the ethereal patterns around it pulsing in sync with the helicopter's movements. Mike's voice crackled through their radios with renewed urgency. "Captain, Evan's heading for the emergency life raft. He's trying to launch it solo." The news sent a fresh wave of tension through the group. In these waters, a solo attempt in a life raft would be disastrous. The helicopter's searchlight swept across the scene, illuminating the Northern Star's predicament. The ship listed heavily to one side, its damaged hull fighting a losing battle against the incoming water. Tommy coordinated with the remaining crew, trying to maintain what little stability they had left. "Sarah," Captain Blake gripped her arm, his eyes intense. "Whatever happens, whatever you discover, remember that some things are worth risking everything for." The words carried the weight of a lifetime of decisions made in moments of crisis. The bear moved closer to Sarah, its massive form surprisingly gentle as it positioned itself for the rescue attempt. The lights around them had formed a distinct pattern now, almost like a protective cocoon that seemed to stabilize the helicopter's erratic movements in the storm. "Arctic Rescue 1 to ground team," the pilot's voice crackled through their radios. "We're detecting some unusual electromagnetic activity around your position. Our instruments are going haywire, but the air current. It's like something's creating a stable pocket in the storm." Sarah understood then. The mysterious forces surrounding the bear weren't just for show. They were actively working to ensure the rescue's success, manipulating the very elements around them in ways that defied scientific explanation. As the rescue harness was secured around both Sarah and the bear, a feat that should have been impossible given the creature's size, the lights intensified, creating a bridge of energy that seemed to support their combined weight. The helicopter's crew watched in amazement as their passengers began to rise, the bear remaining perfectly calm despite their precarious position. Suddenly, a shout from the ship caught their attention. Evan had emerged on deck, his face contorted with desperate determination as he struggled with the life raft's launch mechanisms. Tommy and Mike moved to intercept him, but the treacherous conditions made their progress dangerous and slow. The bear turned its massive head toward the ship, its eyes focusing on the unfolding drama. The patterns of light around them shifted, and for a moment Sarah felt a surge of something, understanding perhaps, or a glimpse of the greater purpose that had brought them all to this moment. As they were lifted higher, Sarah could see the full scope of their situation. The ice field stretched out around them like a broken mirror, reflecting the mysterious lights that continued to pulse and swirl. Beneath the surface, bioluminescent patterns danced in complex formations, suggesting the presence of something vast and ancient stirring in the depths. The helicopter's crew worked with professional efficiency, despite their obvious amazement at their unusual passengers. The bear maintained its serene composure, even as they were buffeted by strong winds. The lights followed them up, maintaining their protective barrier against the storm's fury. Below them, Captain Blake coordinated with Tommy and Mike to handle the situation with Evan, while simultaneously preparing for the possibility of abandoning ship. The Northern Star's condition was deteriorating rapidly, but there was still time to ensure everyone's safety, if they worked together. Sarah felt a gentle pressure against her mind, not intrusive, but comforting. The bear's presence beside her radiated a sense of purpose and understanding that transcended normal animal behavior. Whatever this creature was, wherever it had come from, she knew their journey together was far from over. From the helicopter's open door, Sarah watched the drama unfolding below with growing anxiety. The Northern Star's situation was becoming more critical by the minute, its damaged hull surrendering to the relentless Arctic waters. But it was the mysterious lights emanating from the depths that held her attention. They seemed to be growing stronger, more purposeful. "The equipment's going crazy," the helicopter pilot shouted over the roar of the engines. "Whatever's causing these energy readings, it's unlike anything we've ever encountered." The bear beside Sarah remained calm, its presence somehow making the impossible situation feel manageable. Below, Captain Blake coordinated the evacuation efforts with practiced efficiency. Tommy and Mike had managed to secure Evan, preventing him from risking his life with the solo launch attempt. The rest of the crew worked to deploy the remaining life rafts properly, their movements careful and coordinated, despite the treacherous conditions. "Sarah," Captain Blake's voice crackled through the radio. "The bear. It's not just what it appears to be, is it? All these lights, these patterns, they're connected to something bigger, aren't they?" Before she could respond, the sea around the Northern Star began to glow with an intensity that rivaled the aurora above. The bioluminescent patterns beneath the surface had organized themselves into complex geometric shapes, creating what appeared to be a massive safety net of light beneath the failing ship. The bear shifted beside Sarah, its eyes fixed on the display below. The energy patterns around them pulsed in harmony with the oceanic light show, creating a bridge between sky and sea. Sarah felt that gentle pressure against her mind again, stronger now, more focused, as if the bear was trying to prepare her for what was about to happen. "Captain?" Mike's voice cut through the radio static. "The currents, they're changing, something's stabilizing the ship." The Northern Star had indeed stopped its dangerous listing, held in place by forces that defied conventional physics. The helicopter pilot maneuvered their craft to maintain a better view of the situation. "Arctic Rescue 1 to Northern Star," he called. "We're seeing multiple vessels approaching your position. Looks like the fishing fleet picked up your distress signal." Through the swirling snow, Sarah could make out the shapes of several ships moving toward them with purpose. The bear watched their approach with what seemed like approval, the lights around it pulsing in a rhythm that matched the bioluminescent displays below. Tommy's voice came through next. "Captain, the flooding, it's stopped. I don't know how, but the water level in the engine room isn't rising anymore." The mysterious forces at work seemed to be buying them precious time, holding the damaged vessel together until help could arrive. The bear turned its massive head towards Sarah, and in that moment, she understood something fundamental about their situation. This wasn't just about saving a stranded animal or even saving their ship. They had stumbled upon something ancient and profound, a force that had always existed in these waters, watching and waiting. The rescue ships drew closer, their powerful searchlights cutting through the storm. The mysterious lights beneath the surface seemed to guide them, creating safe channels through the treacherous ice field. Captain Blake coordinated with the approaching vessels, organizing a synchronized rescue operation that would ensure everyone's safety. Sarah felt a subtle shift in the energy around them. The bear's presence beside her seemed to grow stronger, more purposeful. The lights that had followed them into the helicopter began to form distinct patterns, not random displays, but a form of communication she was only beginning to understand. "Look!" Mike's voice carried a note of wonder. "The ice, it's moving, creating a path for the rescue ships." Indeed, the massive ice formations were shifting, guided by the same mysterious force that had led them back to save the bear. The helicopter maintained its position, providing light and coordination for the rescue operation below. Sarah watched as the crew of the Northern Star began their careful evacuation, moving in groups to the waiting rescue vessels. Even Evan, now subdued and perhaps humbled by the inexplicable events around them, cooperated with the evacuation procedures. Through it all, the bear remained a steady presence beside Sarah, its eyes reflecting wisdom that seemed to span ages. The patterns of light around them had transformed into something more complex, a story written in pure energy, waiting to be understood. The rescue operation continued below as Sarah and the bear watched from the helicopter's vantage point. The mysterious lights that had guided them through the crisis now formed intricate patterns around the Northern Star and the approaching rescue vessels, creating safe passages through the treacherous waters. All crew members accounted for, Captain Blake's steady voice came through the radio. The rescue ships are in position. We're beginning the transfer now. His words carried the relief of a commander seeing his people to safety, though the wonder of their situation was evident in his tone. The bear shifted beside Sarah, drawing her attention. Its eyes held a depth of intelligence that seemed to grow clearer with each passing moment. The lights surrounding them had begun to form distinct symbols, not random patterns, but a form of communication that tickled at the edges of Sarah's consciousness. The conservation center in Tromsø is standing by, the pilot informed them. They've never attempted anything quite like this before, but they're prepared to receive our unusual passenger. The bear's presence had somehow normalized in the helicopter. Its massive form settled peacefully despite the extraordinary circumstances. Below, the rescue ships had positioned themselves in a protective circle around the Northern Star. The bioluminescent patterns beneath the surface guided their movements, ensuring they avoided the dangerous ice formations. The scene looked like an orchestrated dance, with ships, lights, and nature working in perfect harmony. "Sarah," Tommy's voice crackled through the radio, "you should see what's happening down here. The water around the ship, it's like it's alive." The bioluminescent display had indeed intensified, creating what appeared to be a cushion of energy that supported the failing vessel. Captain Blake coordinated the final stages of the evacuation, his voice carrying across the airwaves with practiced authority. "Last group preparing to transfer now. The rescue ships will remain on station until everyone is safely aboard." The lights beneath the surface pulsed in approval, their patterns matching the rhythm of the aurora above. The bear's attention remained fixed on the scene below, its expression holding something that looked remarkably like satisfaction. Sarah felt that gentle pressure against her mind again, stronger now, more focused. Images began to form in her thoughts, not memories, but something else entirely. She saw the Arctic as it had been centuries ago, teeming with life both above and below the ice. She saw the bear's kind, not just animals, but guardians of an ancient balance, keepers of secrets that mankind had forgotten. The visions filled her with a sense of purpose and understanding that transcended her scientific training. "Remarkable readings coming from the water," one of the rescue ship's scientists reported over the shared channel. "The energy patterns we're detecting, they match ancient signals that we've been picking up for years but could never explain." The bear turned its gaze to Sarah, and in that moment she understood their true purpose. This wasn't just about saving a single creature, or even a ship's crew. They had been chosen to witness something that had been hidden from human eyes for generations. The lights around them began to coalesce into more defined shapes, telling a story that stretched back through time. Sarah saw the bear's kind working in harmony with forces beneath the ice, maintaining a delicate balance that extended far beyond the Arctic's frozen surface. "Final transfer complete," Captain Blake announced. "All crew members safely aboard the rescue vessels." His voice carried both relief and a touch of sadness. Watching your ship survive such an ordeal only to face uncertainty was never easy for a captain. The bear's presence beside Sarah felt different now, more purposeful. The mysterious lights that had followed them created a cocoon of energy around the helicopter, stabilizing it against the storm's diminishing fury. Through the swirling snow, Sarah could see the rescue ships beginning their careful journey toward safety, guided by the bioluminescent patterns that still danced beneath the waves. As they turned toward Tromsø, Sarah realized that their journey was far from over. The bear hadn't just sought rescue, it had chosen them, chosen her, to understand something vital about the world they thought they knew. The lights continued their dance around them, telling a story that was only beginning to unfold. The lights of Tromsø appeared through the clearing storm, like a constellation of earthbound stars. The helicopter approached the conservation center, where a team of specialists waited with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. The bear remained calm beside Sarah, the mysterious aurora still dancing around them both, though somewhat subdued now in the approaching dawn. "Conservation Center, this is Arctic Rescue 1, the pilot announced. "Approaching with 2 passengers, 1 human, 1... well, you'll need to see for yourself." The bear turned its massive head toward the brightening horizon, its eyes reflecting something ancient and knowing. Sarah felt the gentle pressure of the bear's consciousness against her mind again, sharing images and feelings that transcended ordinary communication. She saw glimpses of an underwater world she'd never imagined, vast networks of bioluminescent life forms working in harmony with creatures like her ursine companion, maintaining balances humans had never understood. The rescue ships report all crew safely aboard. The radio crackled with updates. They're proceeding to port under escort. Captain Blake sends his regards. Sarah smiled, relieved that her shipmates were safe, though she knew their experience would forever change how they viewed the Arctic waters. The Conservation Center had prepared their largest enclosure, though Sarah now understood that no ordinary containment could truly hold this extraordinary being. The bear had chosen to come here, guided by purpose rather than circumstance. As they descended toward the landing pad, the lights around them began to pulse with renewed intensity. The Conservation Center's equipment started registering unprecedented readings, their instruments detecting energy patterns that defied conventional explanation. Sarah, Dr. Elena Petrov, the center's lead researcher, called through the radio, "We've never seen readings like these. Whatever's accompanying that bear, it's changing everything we thought we knew about Arctic wildlife." The bear's presence seemed to affect the entire facility. As they touched down, the lights in the complex flickered and danced, responding to the energy field that surrounded their unusual guest. Even the resident animals appeared to sense something extraordinary, their behavior showing a mixture of reverence and recognition. The helicopter's doors opened to reveal a welcome party like no other. Scientists, researchers, and wildlife specialists stood in awe as Sarah and the bear emerged together. The mysterious lights created a gentle pathway between the aircraft and the prepared enclosure, guiding them with purpose. "Incredible," Dr. Petrov breathed, watching the display. "The energy readings. They match patterns we've detected deep beneath the ice, patterns we've been studying for years without understanding their source." The bear moved with deliberate grace, acknowledging the humans around it with an intelligence that could no longer be dismissed as mere animal instinct. Sarah walked beside her extraordinary companion, feeling privileged to be part of whatever was unfolding. The bear's presence had awakened something in her, a connection to ancient truths that her scientific training had never prepared her for. Inside the specially prepared area, the bear moved with purpose toward a pool of water that connected to the fjord. The moment it approached the water's edge, the surface began to glow with the same bioluminescent patterns they'd witnessed at sea. The scientists' instruments recorded unprecedented readings as energy patterns emerged that mirrored the aurora still dancing above them. "It's like the water itself is responding to its presence," one of the researchers observed, frantically taking notes. "These patterns, they're similar to what we've observed in deep-sea trenches, but never this close to the surface. Never this organized." Sarah watched as the bear turned to face her once more, its eyes holding centuries of wisdom. The gentle pressure in her mind returned, sharing one final vision, a glimpse of the vast network of life and energy that existed beneath the Arctic ice, a world where bears like this one served as guardians of ancient secrets and protectors of delicate balances. Dr. Petrov approached Sarah, her expression a mixture of wonder and professional curiosity. The rescue ships radioed ahead, told us about the lights, the impossible things they witnessed, but seeing it in person, she shook her head in amazement. "Sarah, I think we're on the verge of discovering something extraordinary here." The bear settled near the water's edge, the lights around it pulsing gently now, creating patterns that the researchers' equipment recorded with desperate enthusiasm. Sarah understood that their real journey, the understanding of what they'd discovered, was only beginning. Days passed at the Conservation Center as scientists from around the world gathered to study the extraordinary phenomena surrounding their unusual guest. The bear had maintained its serene presence, the mysterious lights continuing their dance around its enclosure, creating patterns that defied conventional understanding but seemed to hold profound meaning. Sarah spent countless hours with the creature, their silent communication growing stronger with each passing day. Through their connection, she learned of an ancient partnership between the bears and beings that dwelled in the depths of the Arctic waters. guardians of a delicate balance that had existed long before humans ventured into these frozen realms. "The energy patterns are unlike anything we've ever recorded," Dr. Petrov explained during one of their daily briefings, gesturing to walls of data displays. "They match signals we've detected in the deepest parts of the Arctic Ocean, but we never understood their source until now." The bear's presence had transformed the entire facility. The pool in its enclosure maintained a constant bioluminescent glow, creating patterns that matched the aurora above. Other animals in the center responded to its presence with unusual behavior, not fear, but a kind of reverence that suggested they recognized something ancient and powerful in their midst. Captain Blake and the crew of the Northern Star had been welcomed as heroes upon their return to port. The rescue ship's crews corroborated their incredible story, their instruments having recorded evidence of the mysterious forces that had aided in their escape. Tommy and Mike had become regular visitors to the center, drawn by an experience that had forever changed their understanding of the Arctic waters they had sailed for so long. "It's like everything we thought we knew about the Arctic was just the surface," Mike commented one evening, watching the lights dance above the bear's enclosure. "There's so much more going on beneath the ice, isn't there?" Sarah nodded, understanding now that their encounter had been no accident. The bear had chosen them specifically, using their rescue attempt as a bridge between two worlds that had grown too far apart. Through their shared consciousness, she had glimpsed a network of life and energy that spanned the entire Arctic region, ancient patterns of cooperation and protection that humans had never fully comprehended. Dr. Petrov and her team worked tirelessly to document and understand the phenomena they were witnessing. The bear's presence had opened new avenues of research, challenging long-held assumptions about wildlife intelligence and the interconnectedness of Arctic ecosystems. "The patterns we're recording," Dr. Petrov explained to Sarah, "they're not random. They're a form of communication, a language written in light and energy that we're only beginning to decipher." Her eyes shone with the excitement of discovery as she showed Sarah the latest readings. Through it all, the bear maintained its quiet dignity, its eyes holding depths of wisdom that seemed to reach across ages. The lights around it had begun to form more complex patterns, telling stories of ancient partnerships between surface and depths, of guardians who maintained balances humans had never known existed. One evening, as Sarah sat near the enclosure reviewing the day's data, she felt a particularly strong connection with the bear. Images flooded her mind, vast underwater cities of light, bears swimming alongside bioluminescent beings in complex dances of protection and renewal, ancient ceremonies that kept the Arctic's heart beating in harmony with the planet's rhythms. "We've never been alone up here," she whispered, understanding finally hitting her with full force. "All this time, there's been a whole other world working to protect these waters, these ecosystems." The bear's eyes met hers, confirming her realization with a gentle pulse of shared consciousness. Dr. Petrov approached, carrying new readings that showed unprecedented patterns of energy emanating from the depths of the Arctic Ocean. "Something's changing," she said, her voice filled with wonder. It's like the bear's presence here has awakened something. The signals we're detecting from beneath the ice, they're growing stronger, more organized." Sarah understood then that their rescue of the bear had been just the beginning. They had been chosen to witness something extraordinary, to begin building a bridge between human understanding and ancient truths that had always existed in these frozen waters. As the Arctic spring approached, the Conservation Center had become a hub of unprecedented discovery. The bear's presence had catalyzed a revolution in how scientists viewed the region's ecosystems. The mysterious lights that had first appeared during their rescue continued to dance around the facility, their patterns growing more complex and meaningful with each passing day. Sarah sat in her makeshift office, surrounded by monitors displaying data from the latest deep-sea surveys. The research vessels had detected vast networks of bioluminescent activity beneath the ice, confirming what the bear had been showing her all along, an ancient system of life and energy that humans had never fully understood. Captain Blake had returned to the center for one final visit before taking command of a new vessel. The Northern Star's insurance claim had been settled, with Evan facing consequences for his actions. But more importantly, the crew's experience had transformed them into advocates for Arctic preservation, sharing their story with anyone who would listen. "It's changing everything, isn't it?" Blake asked, watching the bear through the observation window. The creature had maintained its dignified presence, its eyes still holding that impossible depth of wisdom that had first captured their attention on that stormy night. "We're just beginning to understand," Sarah replied, showing him the latest findings. "The signals we're detecting, the patterns of light and energy, they're part of a communication network that spans the entire Arctic region. The bears aren't just animals, they're guardians, working with forces we're only starting to comprehend." Dr. Petrov entered with fresh excitement, carrying new data readings. The underwater sensors are picking up unprecedented activity. "The patterns we first saw during your rescue, they're appearing all across the Arctic. It's like the whole region is awakening to a rhythm we never knew existed." Through her connection with the bear, Sarah had learned of an ancient partnership between surface and depths, a delicate dance of protection and renewal that had maintained the Arctic's balance for millennia. The mysterious lights were not just displays, but a language, a means of communication between worlds that humans had long thought separate. Tommy and Mike arrived for their weekly visit, bringing news from the fishing fleet. "The patterns you're tracking," Tommy reported, "other ships are seeing them too. It's like the whole Arctic is coming alive with these lights." The bear acknowledged their presence with a gentle nod, the aurora-like displays around its enclosure pulsing in greeting. The pool in the bear's enclosure had become a window into another world. The bioluminescent patterns beneath its surface matched the signals now being detected throughout the Arctic waters, creating a symphony of light and energy that told stories of ancient guardianships and future possibilities. As Sarah made her final notes of the day, the bear approached the observation window. Their shared consciousness had grown stronger over time, allowing her to understand more of what the creature had been trying to show them. The images it shared now spoke of hope, of a future where humans could learn to work in harmony with the ancient forces that had always protected these waters. "We're ready," Sarah announced to the assembled team, "ready to begin the next phase." The bear's presence had been not just a miracle to be studied, but a bridge between worlds that had grown too far apart. Its rescue had opened doors of understanding that would change how humans viewed their relationship with the Arctic forever. The lights above the facility danced in harmony with the aurora borealis, creating patterns that matched the deepening understanding in Sarah's heart. The bear's eyes met hers one final time, sharing a vision of the future, one where the ancient guardians of the Arctic and human protectors could work together to preserve the delicate balances that kept their world alive. Dr. Petrov gathered her research team, their excitement palpable as new data continued to pour in from stations across the Arctic. "What we've discovered here," she said, her voice full of wonder, "is just the beginning. The bear has shown us that there's so much more to learn, so much more to protect." As the midnight sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Sarah understood that their journey had been more than just a dramatic rescue at sea. It had been an awakening, a call to understand and protect the ancient partnerships that had always existed in these frozen waters. The bear had chosen them not just to save its life, but to help bridge the gap between two worlds that had always been meant to work together. The future stretched before them like the endless Arctic horizon, full of possibilities and discoveries yet to come. The mysterious lights continued their eternal dance, a reminder that some mysteries are meant not just to be solved, but to be understood with the heart as much as the mind. Dear listeners, we hope this extraordinary tale of the Northern Star and its encounter with forces beyond our understanding has moved you as deeply as it has moved us. To continue this journey of discovery and wonder, we've prepared a special playlist featuring equally captivating stories of humanity's encounters with the mysterious and magnificent. Find it by clicking the link to your left. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore the depths of human experience and the mysteries that surround us. Join us in the comments below to share your thoughts on this remarkable journey of discovery and connection. Until our next adventure, remember that sometimes the most profound mysteries are those that remind us of our connection to the natural world.